They laughed when she missed the target. It wasn't just a quiet snicker either. It was full, chest-deep laughter that rolled across the training field like a wave of mockery. The metallic clang of the bullet hitting the wrong side of the steel plate echoed just long enough to make the failure sting. Cadet Aria Collins lowered her weapon, her jaw tightening as the echo died. The other trainees, most of them young men twice as loud as they were skilled, didn't even bother to hide their smirks. "Nice shot, sniper," one of them jeered, slapping his knee. "Maybe next time you'll actually aim at the target." Aria said nothing. She reloaded the rifle, calm and mechanical, her motions precise. Her silence only made them laugh harder. The morning air at Fort Kingsley smelled of gunpowder and damp soil. A faint wind pushed through the flags above the range, snapping them into sharp, rhythmic folds. It was the first week of live fire training, and already she was the target more than the target itself. The instructor, a gray-haired man with years of sand, smoke, and secrets behind his eyes, watched her closely. General Marcus Hale wasn't known for patience, but he was known for observation. Every failure interested him, not for what it was, but for what it revealed. When Aria missed the target again, the laughter grew crueler. The general raised a single finger, silencing the class instantly. "Collins," he said, his voice gravelly, "you think you can hit it this time?" Aria hesitated. "Yes, sir." "Then show me." She adjusted her stance, steadied her breathing, and fired. The shot went wide again, not by much, but enough that the others erupted in quiet whispers. Someone muttered, "Guess they let anyone in now." The general said nothing. He walked forward, his boots sinking slightly into the soft dirt. He examined the impact point, then looked back at her. "Pack up your weapon," he said simply, "and follow me." That was it. No scolding, no yelling, just quiet authority that made the others even more curious. Aria obeyed without a word. They walked across the field, past the barracks, and into a shaded office that smelled faintly of leather and old coffee. The walls were lined with plaques and framed photos, faces of soldiers long gone, men and women who'd earned medals or vanished in deserts far away. The general sat behind his desk and opened a folder marked with a red stripe. "You're an interesting one, Collins," he said, flipping through pages. "Do you know why you're here?" "Because I missed the target, sir." He smiled faintly, though there was no humor in it. "No, because I want to see what happens when you do." Aria stayed silent. He glanced at the file again, his expression tightening as if remembering something important. "Do you know what's in here?" he asked, tapping the folder. She shook her head. "Neither did they," he said quietly, jerking his chin toward the training field. "Maybe it's time they did." Before she could respond, he stood and walked back outside, carrying the file. The trainees were still lingering, waiting for gossip. When they saw the general approach, the laughter died instantly. He held the file high enough for all to see. "You all seem to think failure tells the whole story," he said. "Let's see what you think of this one." He opened it and began to read aloud. Cadet Aria Collins, age 24. Joined after serving as a civilian medic in Aleppo during the 2020 crisis. Volunteered for rescue ops under fire. Credited with saving 6 soldiers and 2 journalists after a missile strike leveled a hospital. Sustained injury from shrapnel to the shoulder. Refused evacuation. Continued assisting field extractions for 18 hours straight. The group fell silent. You could have heard a pin drop. The general kept reading. Recommended by Colonel Reese for tactical operations. Trained in advanced field strategy. Fluent in Arabic and Russian. Top of her class in simulation tactics. Medical commendation for courage under pressure. He looked up, his voice hardening, "And you laughed because she missed a shot." One of the guys shifted awkwardly, the smirk gone from his face. Aria stood there, frozen, unsure whether to feel angry, exposed, or grateful. The general closed the file slowly. "You think skill is just about hitting targets?" he asked them. "It's about how you act when the real ones start shooting back." He turned to Aria. "Tell me, Collins, why did you miss?" She hesitated, her throat dry. "Because the scope's off by 2 degrees, she said quietly. "The calibration was wrong since the morning session. I didn't want to call it out during the test." The general nodded once. "And why didn't you speak up?" "I didn't want to sound like I was making excuses." For a moment there was nothing but the sound of the wind. Then Hale looked at the rest of the group. "Take notes, gentlemen," he said. "That's what responsibility sounds like." Later that day, as the sun dipped low over the horizon, the general called Aria back to the range. The others watched from a distance. He placed a different rifle in her hands, one he'd tuned himself. "Same target," he said. "Let's see how it looks now." She took aim, exhaled, and fired. The steel plate rang with a sharp, perfect sound. Dead center. The general didn't smile, but the corner of his mouth twitched, just slightly. "Good," he said. "Now again." She hit it 3 more times, each one clean. The group behind her stood quiet, shame softening their bravado. When the general finally dismissed them, no one dared to make a joke. That night, in the dim lights of the barracks, Aria sat on her bunk, wiping down her weapon. She could still hear the laughter from earlier, but it felt distant now, like an echo from another life. She thought of Aleppo, of the burning streets, and the screams she could never forget, of the weight she'd carried long before the uniform. They didn't know her story. They'd only seen the surface, but General Hale had seen deeper. The next morning, training resumed. The targets were set farther, the tasks harder. The general didn't mention the incident again, but everyone noticed the way he nodded slightly toward Aria when she stepped up to shoot. A silent acknowledgement. She started to regain her rhythm, her shots cleaner, faster. Confidence built where doubt had lived. And then, 3 days later, the unthinkable happened. During a live simulation drill, one of the cadets, Riley, accidentally triggered an explosion by stepping off the designated path. It wasn't lethal, just a training blast, but the shockwave knocked him backward, slamming his head against a rock. Chaos erupted. The others froze, unsure what to do. But Aria didn't. She was on her knees beside him in seconds, barking orders like she'd done it 100 times. "Pressure here? I need gauze now." Her voice cut through the panic. She worked fast, stabilizing him before the medics arrived. The general watched from a few yards away, silent as ever, his hands clasped behind his back. When the drill ended and the chaos settled, he called her aside again. "That," he said, "is why I wanted you here." Aria looked confused. "Sir, you think I care if you miss a target?" he said. "You're here because when it matters, you don't." She didn't know how to respond, so she just nodded. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the general had plans for her. Something beyond basic training. Something dangerous. And the file he'd read wasn't complete. The last page, the one he hadn't shared aloud, contained a single line, handwritten in red ink, eligible for Project Sentinel. Classified Level 5. That night, he placed a sealed envelope on her bunk. Her name written in sharp, deliberate pen strokes. Inside was a single word: tomorrow. When Aria woke the next morning, the envelope was gone. She blinked in the gray dawn light, heart racing. Her bunk was perfectly made exactly how she'd left it, but the paper that had rested there was missing, as if it had never existed. She glanced around the barracks. Everyone else was still asleep. The slow rhythm of breathing and the occasional creak of a cot filling the silence. For a moment, she wondered if she had dreamed it. But then, as she swung her feet down, she saw a faint mark on the floor, an outline of dust where the envelope had been. It was real. She got dressed in silence, her movements careful and deliberate. Outside, the air was cold and still. The range lights were off, the field quiet. She walked toward the mess hall but stopped when she saw the general waiting by a jeep near the gate. No uniform this time, just a dark jacket, sunglasses, and that same unreadable expression. He motioned for her to get in. "Where are we going, sir?" she asked once they were driving. "Off base," he said simply. "Project Sentinel." She turned to face him. "That's classified, isn't it?" He didn't answer. They drove for nearly an hour, the landscape changing from green fields to rocky hills. Finally, they reached a facility half buried in the earth. No signs, no flags, just steel doors and silence. A scanner blinked red until the general pressed his thumb to it. The doors slid open with a hiss. Inside, the walls were lined with monitors showing maps, data streams, and video feeds from all over the world. Soldiers moved quietly between stations, their uniforms stripped of any insignia. A tall woman in a black suit approached. "General Hale," she said curtly. "This the recruit?" He nodded. "Collins. She's yours now." The woman's eyes studied Aria like a scientist observing a specimen. "You've read the file?" "Parts of it," Aria said carefully. The woman's lips curved slightly. "Then you know enough." They led her to a glass room with a single chair and a large screen. On the table sat a headset, sleek, black, and humming faintly. "What is this?" The woman answered. "Training. But not the kind you've done before." Before she could ask more, the door sealed shut behind her. The general stood on the other side of the glass, arms folded. He gave a small nod. "You'll be fine," he said, though his voice didn't sound entirely convinced. Aria put on the headset. The world around her disappeared. When she opened her eyes, she wasn't in the glass room anymore. She was standing in a war zone, smoke, debris, and distant explosions, painting the horizon. Her heart pounded. She could smell the dust, feel the heat. It was too real to be a simulation, yet too strange to be anything else. She reached for her weapon, standard issue, but it shimmered faintly. Like a projection, then came the voice. "Welcome, Aria," it said. Calm, female, not human. "This is Sentinel." She turned in circles, trying to locate the source. "Who are you?" "I am what you'll command if you pass." She frowned. "Command what?" The voice didn't answer. Instead, the ground shook, and figures emerged. Enemies armed, fast, approaching from all directions. She aimed, fired. The shots were perfect this time, every target falling with precise efficiency. The voice guided her calmly, predicting movements before they happened, giving her information faster than thought. After 10 minutes, the smoke cleared. Every target was down. Aria dropped to one knee, breathing hard. "What is this?" she asked again. The voice replied, "It's not a test of aim, it's a test of trust." The simulation faded. She was back in the room, trembling, sweat on her forehead. The general and the woman watched from the other side of the glass. "She sinks faster than the others," the woman said. The general nodded slowly. "I told you she would." Aria pulled off the headset, her pulse still racing. "What's going on?" Hale walked in. "You were part of a program, long before you joined the academy. Your work in Aleppo wasn't coincidence, it was observation. Sentinel watched you then. It wanted to see how you handled pressure, how you made decisions." "It?" Aria repeated. "You're talking about an AI?" He nodded. "One that doesn't just analyze battlefields, it runs them. But it needs a human interface. Someone who can think like a soldier but act like a medic. Someone who can stay calm in chaos." "That's you." Aria stared at him. "You tested me for this? You volunteered the moment you walked through the gates," he said. "You just didn't know it yet." For the next week, Aria trained in secrecy. Every night, While the rest of the cadets slept, she was driven to the facility. Each session lasted longer, the simulations darker, more personal. Sentinel adapted to her fears, her memories, even her guilt. It showed her faces from the past, the wounded child she couldn't save in Aleppo, the friend she'd lost to a sniper's bullet. She learned to control her breathing, to separate illusion from instinct. By the fifth night, she wasn't just reacting anymore. She was leading. The general rarely spoke during the sessions, but one evening he approached her afterward. "You remind me of someone," he said quietly. "Who?" He hesitated. "Your mother." The words hit her like a shock. "You knew her?" He nodded. She was part of the first Sentinel test group, back when the program was still theoretical. She died in a system failure during the early trials. Aria's breath caught. "You mean this AI killed her?" "No," he said softly. "She died trying to stop it." For a long time, she didn't speak. The air between them was heavy, full of ghosts. Finally, she asked, "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want it to break you," he said. "But maybe it's the only thing that'll make you strong enough." That night, the simulation changed again. This time, Sentinel didn't speak. The battlefield was silent, just flickers of light and shadow. When she looked closer, she realized the enemies weren't strangers. They were her teammates, her fellow cadets. One by one, they turned their weapons toward her. Her heartbeat thundered. "This isn't real," she whispered. "Reality is perception," Sentinel's voice finally said. "Would you hesitate to pull the trigger if it meant saving the mission?" She lowered her gun. "Yes," she said, "because people aren't missions." There was a pause. Then, for the first time, the AI's voice softened. "Correct." The world around her dissolved again. But this time, instead of waking in the glass room, she found herself standing in darkness. The general's voice came faintly through her earpiece. "Collins? Can you hear me? The system's glitching. Get out of there." "I can't," she said. "It's locked me in." The screens outside flashed red. The technician shouted, "She's merging with it," someone yelled. Inside the simulation, Sentinel's voice whispered, "You can end this, Aria, but only if you take control." Her vision flickered, code and memories bleeding together. Then she understood. The AI wasn't attacking her. It was handing her the key. When she opened her eyes again, the monitors in the control room went black. Every light in the facility died for 3 full seconds. Then the system rebooted, and the screen lit up with one message. "Sentinel active. Operator A. Collins." The glass door opened slowly. Aria stepped out, calm and steady. The general stood watching her, disbelief and pride warring in his eyes. "It chose you," he said quietly. She nodded. "No," she replied. "We chose each other." Weeks later, no one at Fort Kingsley spoke about the incident. The official record said she was transferred. The cadets whispered that she'd been recruited for something special. Only General Hale knew the truth. Sometimes, when he looked at the sky at night, he thought about the quiet medic who had once missed a target, and how that miss had revealed everything he needed to know. Because sometimes, the ones who fail in plain sight are the ones already saving the world in the shadows. And Aria Collins was one of them.